The Bill of Rights protects every American's God-given right to keep and bear arms. Now that right is being seriously undermined as legally registered rifles are being confiscated in some parts of our country. If we're not careful, we may find ourselves with no right to own guns, and that's where Gun Owners of America comes in. Gun Owners of America is in Washington every day fighting for you to keep that right. Congressman Ron Paul has called GOA the only no-compromise gun lobby in Washington. You need to be part of this great grassroots group of activists who are keeping the heat on their members of Congress. Find out right now how you can join. Call 888-886-GUNS and get started receiving their fact-filled newsletters and action alerts. Call 888-886-GUNS or go to their webpage at gunowners.org and help make your voice heard in Washington. Make that call right now and call Gun Owners of America at 888-886-GUNS. Remember, it's not just about gun control, it's about control.
It's like the novelist Kafka that wrote about people that got into situations that they had no idea, why am I in jail? Why is this happening to me? It just happens, and it's outrageous when something like this can happen. I guess if we were to entitle this program, it might be, It Really Matters What Kind of Lawyer You Have. And Jeff Hill had an attorney, but as a poor college student, he took the luck of the draw that was dealt him from the public defender system. And alas, it's not the only time you get what you pay for. And if you don't pay anything, well, ouch. Jeff, thanks for coming on to do the show with us. And I'm sorry it's on the basis of something that should never have happened, but welcome aboard.
Oh, thank you very much, Larry, for having me on.
Jeff, you decided in mid-career to go to college and see if you could get some credentials under your belt, and you were, in your sophomore year when things started to unravel?
That's right, Larry. I was 40 years old. I was living out in California, and I was doing work as a respiratory therapist, but I didn't have a college degree. I did that back in the 80s when you could grandfather in on OJT. So I basically was running around without any school, and when the economy crashed in 2008, I started losing a lot of hours. So I decided that I wanted to go back to school, and I decided on TV weather meteorology, the weatherman that you see on the news. And Mississippi State has a great university. My folks live here in Arkansas, so that would have been just the next state over. And so I went to Mississippi State University, and I was there for 2 years. So I was arrested for having my hunting rifle on the campus of Mississippi State. And so my charge was weapon on campus.
It was just bizarre. Jeff, I couldn't hardly believe the things that happened to you. I do believe, but I was just stunned that the train wreck continued to develop, and it finally ended as a full-blown train wreck. And it would have been so easy at many points to have stopped the train wreck, but that wasn't to be. So why don't we unwind now back? You've kind of given, as you said, the overview all at once, but there you are, you're a student. The charge was that you had the rifle on campus. Actually, you weren't on campus.
Well, to go back just a little bit for our listeners, I had been at school for about a year and a half. I took about 2 years of college because I went through the summer, and I was living in the dormitory that whole time. I was living in several dormitories, and that was on the main part of the campus. Your dormitories are usually sitting right next to the library, to the cafeteria, to the science building. It's right there in the middle of it. And during the summer, I remember receiving a letter from the housing department saying that we are overcrowded with too many freshmen, so we're having to move all the upperclassmen. By then I was a sophomore going into a junior. We're having to move the upperclassmen off campus and move them into off-campus housing. And I had a couple of friends that had to go off to some apartments around the city because they forced them out of the dorms too. And this letter said that you will be assigned to such and such apartment. If I would have just kept that letter, I don't think any of this would have ever happened. And, that's my fault in that I didn't follow through. I just wasn't thinking about it. It didn't even occur to me.
Well, the idea that something like this would occur, indeed, how could that ever be on the radar? Because you weren't breaking any laws.
Yes. Now, somebody had told me that you can't have your gun in the dormitory, so therefore I didn't have a rifle in the dormitory at all. But I get this letter, and so I call up to the housing department and ask them what's going on. And they said, yeah, we're having to move people out, so you're going to go to these apartments. And they verbally told me that you drive off campus to get to these apartments, And unfortunately, that doesn't stick in court, because when you say that, that's called hearsay, and that gets overruled real fast.
And you weren't able to find somebody to corroborate that? Yeah, that's what we were telling students.
Well, unfortunately, after my arrest, I called the housing department just absolutely terrified. I've just been arrested, and I remember the people that work there are college students, so they're student workers. They're only 18 years old, and they were just speaking in general terms. And like I said, my fault is I didn't follow up. I didn't come in and say, hey, I need to know exactly where these are, or is this campus or not, because then somebody would have given me a straight answer. And when I called the housing department later after I got arrested, they would not let me onto campus. I'd been thrown off campus, and they wouldn't let me speak to anyone in the housing department. So
you had become persona non grata because you actually had a gun.
Yeah, and then, of course, a year and a half later, well, it was a year later when we had the trial, these students are all gone because they've moved on, they've graduated, most of them don't stick around very long. So anyway, back to her telling me you just drive off campus. Well, you really do. I drove out the exit past probably a 10 by 20 billboard that says Mississippi State University. You cross a freeway and then come into a residential neighborhood like most colleges are. You have houses and little apartments around the college. But this was on a regular street where people are parked out on the street. There's no parking signs that are restricting you that, say that you have to have a parking sticker or a certain pass for a red zone or a green zone like you see on campuses. Now we've gotten into a regular neighborhood where there's a gas station at the end of the block, and these apartments are sitting about in the middle, but there's houses all around and barbecue pits, and people are parked out in the street and stuff. So it's a residential neighborhood. And the apartments, I've climbed all over them, do not say property of Mississippi State University at all.
And there's some distance from the school, so it's not as if they are in any close proximity. What did you tell me before we went on the air? Maybe one person or two, a roommate and somebody else. Actually, even that's all that knew you had a gun, and it was in a closet. I guess it's a hunting rifle. It's not even you might call it a target rifle, but it's certainly not one of the quote unquote assault weapons. It's just a ordinary-looking 5-foot-long rifle, not exactly suitable for drive-by shootings, bank robberies, and other nefarious activities.
Oh, yeah. Well,
yeah, go ahead.
After driving by and seeing the apartments, I went back to Arkansas on a short break because it was in between school, and then thinking that it was off campus, and like I said, I'll apologize to all your listeners. I didn't follow through, and I should have. But thinking it was off campus, I went and got my hunting rifle, which is one of these Mosin-Nagant rifles that you see from World War II. You see them in every pawn shop. They're on sale for $99. And they're about 5 feet tall, or almost. They're extremely large rifles. And they look like something, from the early 1900s because they're not, it's an old bolt-action rifle. It has a solid bottom, which means that you can't add or detach magazines to it. You just have to load the bullets from the top. It's a bolt action, so you pull the bullets from the top. And if you don't have stripper clips, then you just add them in one at a time, and it holds five rounds. But in no way is it considered like a semi-automatic M16 or
Exactly.
Looks like something out of the Napoleonic Wars, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners have seen the Mosin-Nagants because they're quite popular.
I think it was in use at the turn of the last century, and it is truly a bolt action. Right? You have to pull the bolt back to get the next round in, so it's not semi-automatic. No, it's a single-shot bolt action. So I came home one day, and I was studying for a test, and I jumped in the shower. I had my books out to get ready to study for the test the next day. Jumped in the shower, and there's a knock on the bathroom door that says, "Come out, someone's here to see you." And it was my roommate, and he looked really strange, so I came out in the bath towel, and I looked out and saw what I thought were 3 policemen. It turned out that they were 3 college campus security guards, but they had guns. And they had their legs spread apart and their hands were out in the quick draw position. And boy, my heart just jumped right up into my mouth. You mean they had drawn their guns?
No. They had their hands out.
I see what you mean. ready to draw at a moment's notice.
Yeah,
because they were in a dangerous zone, right?
Yeah, your move, Sheriff. You draw first. That kind of high noon type stance, and just scared me to death. And what I had done is I had unloaded my rifle and just did it out in broad daylight, carried it in, or it may have been I think I actually pulled in at nighttime, but I carried the rifle in, and it was sitting in my closet. Now, I didn't have any bullets in it. It was unloaded. It was empty. I didn't have any bullets in the house. I did have a large box of bullets in the car, 440 bullets that you get on sale for about $85 off the Internet. And
I'll bet you that was described as an arsenal.
Oh, that box would later play into my guilt, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But the rifle's in the closet, and the security officer said, I can't, you know what, I was so scared I can't remember exactly but it said something like, we have information that there's a weapon in here or something. And my first thought was that, maybe some of the neighbors had gotten out in a fight or something out in the front yard, and that, maybe somebody pulled a knife on somebody or what have you.
Let me interrupt you right here. They didn't present a warrant. They didn't have one, I presume.
No, but my and this would later play into court too. My roommate let them in. And so in court that was used against me. Well, the roommate lets them in. Now, my defense was, hey, 3 men with guns that are holstered, and they look like they're about ready to pull them. And, I claimed fear, and I was under duress. So by no means did I claim that I voluntarily let them in, but that all got overruled. So I'm thinking that he was talking about a domestic disturbance or something, and I was about to say, oh, you've got the wrong guy. I really just couldn't process what was happening. And he stopped me and said, no, do you have a rifle? And I said, well, yeah, I've got a hunting rifle. I sure do. And he said, well, can you give it to me? And so I gave it to him, and once again I was expecting him to say, well, somebody was got in a fight with their wife or in the neighborhood or something, and so we got the wrong guy. And I had no idea that they were going to arrest me for a weapon on campus until it happened.
Because you didn't think you were on campus.
So if somebody were to come up and say weapon on campus on a college, I would think more like dealing drugs, and you have it hiding in your pants while you're dealing drugs in the parking lot.
Or an active shooter.
But something to do with crime, maybe robbing someone as they go to the car.
Right.
And once again, that's my fault. I'm not using that as a defense. It's just me being old and not being up with the times, and
not thinking like a criminal.
It just didn't. Even when they were taking me off to jail, I just was sitting there going, "Oh, this has got to be a mistake," and I'm sure this is all going to get cleared up.
He went from, am I correct? It was Mississippi State University.
Sure is.
So it was from MSU to MSP. As in Mississippi State Penitentiary, all because of a gun in a closet. This is a pretty damning indictment of the times that we're in. So there you are, and you're all together, and they're presenting you with the stunning knowledge that you've got a gun, and they're hauling you off to the Hooskow. When did it start to dawn on you what this was all about?
Oh, well, at first, I didn't think anything about it because I went back, after I got bailed out of jail, I went back and looked at the contract that I had. Now, the school would not allow me to have my housing file because they wouldn't allow me into the housing department office, and I actually wasn't allowed on campus. I'd been thrown out of school, and they would not send me my housing file. But from the paperwork that I had and from what I could get on the computer, I looked around, and there was no lease between me, the college, and the apartments. On the contract that I signed with the college, the apartments are not listed. And then when you look under the college website, the apartments are not even listed as being owned by the college.
So you were paying rent to some other entity?
Well, no, I had already paid rent to the school, and that kind of confused me. They had taken my money out a month or two. I don't know how many months earlier, maybe just a month or so. They had already taken it out. I had already paid for the dormitory. So when they put me in the apartments, because this happened immediately, like an emergency type situation, They then turned around and paid for the apartments, so I never saw any of that.
Gotcha.
Later on, you get your bill is printed up on the internet on the college website on your account, but it's not printed up every day. It comes up about every 4 to 5 weeks. So if you go into the library and you use the printer and you print off a few pages, your bill won't probably pop up the next day. But about 5 or 6 weeks later, then someone will say, "Oh, you owe us $10 for printing charges and this and that." Well, they used my bill did print up, and they used that against me in court. However, that bill printed off 2 weeks after I was arrested. So when I was arrested, I didn't understand how the money was flowing, and nobody told me. When things really started to happen is when I showed up to court, and I met my public defender for the first time. Well, I had gone through all this paperwork that I just told you about. So when I sat down with him, I thought, okay, we'll get this straightened out. So I shook his hand, I smiled, and I said, "Hey, there's been a mistake. I don't think these apartments are on campus, and I certainly didn't mean to, upset anyone by having a rifle." And I was trying, I was pretty polite. And I said, here are the contracts, and the property line looks like it's about 200 yards outside the apartments and this and that. And he immediately starts hollering at me saying, "You had 400 bullets in the car, and you've got a rifle. You just need to admit that you had it." And, he was just going off. And I was stunned, and I said, "Well, but wait a minute. As far as contracts, paperwork, leases, and all that, there's nothing between me and the school that lists these apartments." And he slammed his fist down on the table. I tell you what, I jumped up 6 inches.
It sounds like you had an attorney from Handgun Control Incorporated.
My heart jumped. I think I started tearing up. I think that's the one. I haven't cried very many times in my life, but I could feel tears coming just because it just shocked me. And he said, "If you don't go in there and plead guilty, I'm going to personally revoke your bail and throw you in prison for 3 years." Now, I turned around and immediately filed a bar complaint against him. However, since he said it verbally and I didn't record it, I couldn't prove he did it. And, of course, he denied saying it. And for your listeners, you need to take note because that will happen.
It sounds like he followed through on it.
Yeah, or at least he had some people do it.
Exactly.
So the next thing you know, I get a second public defender, and I go in and tell her the same story. Number one, I say, "I need my housing file," because everything that you want to know, from day one, my entire identity dossier that has to do with this whole case is in my housing file at the housing department, and they won't give it to me. She refused to do that, and then she started the same deal. And she claimed that, first, just to scare me, they called a recess for court, and I went out to go eat. My bail bondsman calls me up, just absolutely terrified, saying, "Jeff, I need to take you into the courthouse and surrender you over to the police." And of course, I'm freaking out, saying, "Why?" And she said, "Well, they've got you on murder charges." And I said, "What?" So I met my bail bondsman at the courthouse, and when I came in, the bailiffs were pointing at me, going, "There he is." Well, of course, I just died on the floor. Going from studying weather patterns one day to all of a sudden now I'm, Charles Manson sitting here in the courthouse. Well, it turns out to be a big bluff. My attorney comes out and she starts barking and yelling about stuff, and I'm asking her who are these who's this murder and stuff, and then she shrugs and says, "Well, I just heard that something," but so it turns out she didn't have any proof. And she didn't even have any charges. She just had...
It was a way of getting you back into the building and scare the living daylights out of you.
Well, I was coming back to the building anyway because we were on lunch break.
Sounds to me like she was on a power trip.
It's to scare you into a plea, to plead guilty. I could write a book about this.
It's so much easier. Jeff, I can't tell you the number of times an attorney has told a quote-unquote client, because often it's in this context of the public defender, "Let's just do this the easy way. You plead, and it'll only be about 5 years in jail, and we'll get you off easy." And it's easy money. They don't have to work for that.
I've learned a lot of very, very despicable things. I won't have time to go into them, but they're just horrible, horrible things that go on.
In any case, neither one of these two attorneys were representing the interest of their client. It was just a job, and it was a pain in the neck, and they didn't want to bother. Let's do it the easy way.
Well, and according to Corpus Juris Secundum, and I think it's Volume 4, Section 7, or Volume 7, Section 4, their duty is to the court. And if there is a conflict of interest between the client and the court has priority. And it says it right there in black and white. And they even argued that in my court case, so I've doubly proved that.
It's not very comforting to know that.
No, but that's even on my transcript. The prosecutor and the judge both say, well, as you know, of course, you know that the court has superiority over your client as far as client attorney. So even they reiterated that on top of what CGS.
I don't think that's the way America was started. That's an invention of judges and lawyers, and that's despicable.
It is, and it gets worse. I get caught now. This happens over about a year time. I get called into her office again, and the whole thing about the bail bondsman, I had my bail bondsman repeat that into a tape recorder. So I've got that on recording. So I know your listeners are saying, "Oh, this is unbelievable. You know, maybe this guy is just trying to cover himself." I actually have that on recording. Her saying that yeah, they were claiming that I had blown up buildings and was killing cops. Well, what she was saying is that I belonged to a militia that blew up buildings and killed cops. So I'm thinking the Oklahoma City building, even though I couldn't trap her down into saying anything.
And this is your own attorney?
Yeah, this is my own attorney. This is the bail bondsman telling me what the attorney told her to surrender me to the cops.
Well, so you must have belonged to a militia if you had that Nagant rifle that's a single-shot bolt-action rifle, because we know how many dangerous people use those kinds of guns.
I belong to the Meteorology Club at Mississippi State University.
My guest today is Jeff Hill, been a student at Mississippi State University when the notion that his name could be connected with gun ownership just drove some liberal minds crazy, and Jeff ended up in court being accused of a gun on campus when nothing in any of his paperwork, any of the signs around the university indicated that the apartments were university property. So, and never was that entered into proof in the trial. So here we are going into trial. You've got an attorney which clearly is not on your side, which you'd had two. One of them had even suggested that you had been involved in blowing buildings up.
Yeah, and this is really good information because a lot of people hear about this. So I fulfilled this experiment. You're going to get some really good information out of this. I went on a website, and you fill out one of these forms that say that I'm claiming my liberty, I'm reserving my rights, and those sort of things. A lot of these websites, you know, they go back to the Declaration of Independence,
sure,
which I agree with, but they say fill out this form, and I'm not bound under contract with you, the corporation. I'm a natural
right.
U.S. citizen. I sent one of those in, and that's what she started flipping out over, that I was part of the Randy Weaver gang and stuff, you know, or David Koresh. She never did say who it was, but that's the immediate thought that you get is Ruby Ridge and, you know, these people. So it was because of that paper, because she pulled that out and started banging, you know, slapping the table and saying, here, they're thinking that you're part of a militia and that you're off killing people and stuff.
So your own attorney is actually acting as prosecutor.
Yes, absolutely.
That's very unethical.
Now, I've never been to a militia meeting, so there are no pictures, there's no documents, no undercover agents have ever videotaped me or talked to me at any kind of militia meeting.
Well, Jeff, I have. I've spoken to them, and they've tried to use that in public opinion. Doesn't work, but the idea that somehow the militia is a dangerous thing, we ought to go back and study our history. That's why we're a free country. I want to let folks know just how corrupt the system functions.
Well, the next thing came was a sniper letter. I love the sniper letter. It's just fantastic. I get called to my attorney's office once again, and she hands me a letter that has the letterhead of the prosecutor, the district attorney, Mr. So-and-so from Lowndes County, and it's got the big seal of Mississippi. I mean, this is all official. This letter says that I intend to bring in an expert witness in gunsmithing to testify that Mr. Hill's rifle is indeed a sniper rifle with sniper ammunition.
Well, that's obviously about as big a whopper as there could be, because no gun expert would ever testify to that.
Well, he got one. It was the campus security guard, and he.
Well, that's not a gun expert, because to be a gun expert, you have to have been certified by a court to be considered an expert. And unless did they actually certify this doofus as an expert?
No, he just claimed that he had worked on a lot of guns and worked at a pawn shop.
That doesn't work.
And everybody nodded, and of course I didn't know what was going on, so I didn't object.
Ouch.
But, this is threatening and intimidation to send you a letter threatening you with these sniper allegations. And my attorney then all of a sudden was like, I'd take a plea if I were you. I'd take a plea. This is plead guilty. So I snuck a tape recorder in, and her and another public defender, two of them, from the courthouse, got me in there and started just giving me the third degree about me being a sniper. If you don't go plead guilty and you go into court, if you take this trial, he's going to walk in there and call you a sniper, and then the jury's going to get scared. And I kept arguing, going, well, it's not a sniper rifle. It doesn't have a scope. It doesn't have this and that and that and this, not a bent-down bolt and stuff. And they didn't know what I was talking about, but they could care less. And they even said that. They said, we don't care. The prosecutor doesn't care. Nobody cares. But once he goes in and says sniper, the jury's going to get terrified. And they will convict you just because they're afraid. It's all on emotions. And yes, it does sound like it's from outer space.
Now, the judge was also making some pretty outrageous rulings on the bench, was he not?
I am learning the law right now. So, unfortunately, I'm not at that point where I could tell you exactly what he was doing, because the whole thing, it just looked like I was on a different planet. But a lot of it then was the ignorance about guns, and even in Mississippi, apparently, at least at a university, it's easy to buffalo people when the four-letter word gun is mentioned. Mm-hmm. Well, during the trial, my indictment said that I had criminal intent to carry the rifle onto campus property, which is basically smuggling. That's
that admits right there that it's not on campus property.
Well, that's what my indictment said, and because of all the murder charges or accusations and the sniper accusations, I wound up firing my attorney in court. I had gone through 3 public defenders, remember, 2 of them in the office, 1 of them slapping the table, threatening me with prison time. I'd gone through all 3 of them. They didn't have any more. So I fired her right there in front of everybody in the courtroom, represented myself, which was a terrible idea, but I did better than she did. And
that's really distressing.
The first thing is the prosecutor jumped up and said, I merely have to prove simple possession of a rifle on campus. I jumped up and said, ladies and gentlemen, he did not tell you something. He has to prove that I illegally smuggled the rifle onto campus with criminal intent. Well, boy, he could have fallen out of his chair. But he had that look on his face like it didn't bother him. He was going to win this somehow or another. But I got him on that. When the lady from the school came to testify against me, I simply said, ma'am, do you have a contract with my name in the apartment? And she said, no, I don't. Ma'am, do you have any documentations that show that you own the campus? No, I don't. Ma'am, do you have any documentation showing even the campus? Do you have even some paperwork that has the name of the apartments on it? She said, no, she didn't. There was one item that was an inventory checklist, which is basically me promising not to break the furniture. So you check off the light bulbs and the chair and the drawer, and it's not cracked and anything. Mm-hmm. And it does say Mississippi State, and it does say the name of the apartments, but it does not say that this is Mississippi State property. And what I thought it was like a contract. I thought that the school had a contract with the apartments, mm-hmm. which sounded pretty legitimate, because the apartments had a lot of older people in it, and it didn't look like there was a bunch of students. So I thought that they had just put me into a contract room.
That would definitely create the impression that it's not a dormitory.
That's the only piece of paper they had, and I'm the one that had it. They didn't have it. And I had a copy, and they didn't have the original, and by the rules of the court, you're supposed to have original documents that right. You have in evidence. But then after that, it didn't last very long, because the prosecutor got up and just started talking about sniper. This gunsmith expert got up, started mentioning how the bullets were similar to a sniper round. This rifle was similar to a sniper.
Jeff Hill, we as we speak are in the process of having our attorneys look at the transcript and see if they can find enough there to find something that might be done to right this injustice. We're sorry that this all happened to you, but we appreciate you getting in touch with us, and if there are developments in the future, we'll let our listeners know.